Welcome to chapter 22, and in this chapter we're going to conquer the tiny little concept of supines, but it has a massive impact on our ability to speak Latin. Alright, so this is going to be pretty simple. We have how to form them. Ing in English has multiple ways to do it, and supines is one of them, and then we'll do some practice. In case you didn't know, the English word supine comes from the adjective supine, which means thrown backward or lying inactive. So why is it called that? Well, it's called that because they come from the PPP, which is quite active. Remember, it means having been blanked, having been called. And from the top left form there, vocatus, we're going to make the supine. And you notice the color of the stem changed to what color as it moved there? Blue, which means it's now going to become a masculine noun. And so that kind of process from a very versatile PPP with all those forms and that meaning of having been blanked, sounds really active and involved, suddenly becomes this dead supine up here. Now it's just a boring, dead, unchangeable noun. Well, but supines aren't that dead. They're just frozen. Really what it is it's a concretization of the action calling into a noun, the calling. So that's what it really is. Vocatus, the calling, or you might say a calling. So this is a fourth declension noun, and there's the whole list of forms in there, just like that. And to compare it to the PPP meant having been blanked, or just blanked, and in this case called, whereas the supine over there is translated a blanking, or to blank. Now, Mr. Redmond, I thought you also said that the infinitive, the second principal part up there, is also translated blanking or to blank. Yeah, I did say that, didn't I? So what's the difference between vocare and vocatus down here? What's the difference? Well, the difference is that although they both mean the same thing, yet the infinitive means the concept of calling, like abstractly, ideally, in theory, in the heavens. Whereas the supine over here means an actual instance that I'm imagining right now or recalling. So this one's real, that one's ideal. This one's an instance, that one's a concept. This one can have multiple numbers, like there could be multiple callings. That one can only have a singular up there, as we'll find out when we learn the gerund in chapter 26. So think of this one over here as an actual one, where that one is just calling, in theory. All right, so what do all these cases and numbers of the supine mean? Well, it goes a calling, of a calling. This is completely what you would expect. To or for a calling, the calling, by with from the calling, callings, of the callings, to or for the callings, by with from callings, and so on and so forth. Now, although it has all these cases and numbers, really two of them are way more common than all the others. Now, the others are common, but you have to know where to look. Some people will say, oh, no. There are only two cases of the supine. These two in red. Yeah, you want to bet? If you want to prove to someone else that there are other cases of the supine, you tell them to open up their dictionary and go look up all the supine words that you're going to see on our supine vocab addendum sheet, which you'll get in a few slides. They're all listed there in the dictionary. Like, for instance, actus, actus, an act. means an act. Now, it's not listed under ago, the verb, which is where they're thinking you should look, because to them a supine is a form of a verb. But you have to look for it under its noun form, the entry for actus itself. And that's what a supine is. It's a noun. But most people think of it as just a verb with only two forms. These two in red here, vocatum and vocatu. Really, it's way more. Okay, so in any case, these two are the most common, vocatum and vocatu. Now, for one of these, just the accusative singular, you should always assume that there is a hidden odd before it. So that odd would mean 2 or 4, because that's the sense in which the accusative singular is always used. It's always used directionally, as the goal point, as the goal or end point of some sort of motion. So, for example, if I had narrow falsum, then it would mean I tell a deceiving, or I tell a deception. What does that mean? I mean, maybe you can understand it, but the better way to understand it is to supply that odd, and then it will make sense. I tell for the sake of a deception, or I tell unto a deception. I tell to deceive. That's the way it's understood. All right, so let's go back and analyze these further, these two special most common cases. Okay, so first the one on the top. My advice to you is to follow these guidelines. Number 1, supply odd if needed, which means to blank. Right, okay. Next, these accusative supines almost always occur with the two verbs go or come. So go and come are therefore tip-offs that you've probably got a supine and not some PPP. So if you see the tip-off go or come, and then you see some weird PPP-looking word, especially if it's accusative, remember that go and come are tip-offs that it's not a PPP. What is it? It's an accusative supine. Right. So when it's used in combination with go or come, the way you translate it is a blanking, like go a blanking or come a blanking. Now you notice I have a D there, because that's the Latin, odd blanking. But I'm pretty sure this came from Latin straight into English, with the being what used to be the odd. You know, in Latin it was odd. In English it's just So, the frog went a-courting, 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 the frog went a-courting. Remember this stupid stuff from nursery school? Okay. So when you say that, what you're saying literally is the frog went 2 or 4 courting. But we've just come to say it in English, a blanking. So the way you translate that, of course, is unto blanking, right? Or for blanking. All right. And notice that we have 2 translation options. You can say the boring old generic to blank. That's easy. Or you can say a blanking. Okay, and so now let's do some exercises over there, some examples. I want you to translate each of numbers 1 to 4 in 2 ways each. So stop the video and turn it on when you're ready to see the answer. And the answer? What's up? Are we going a-sitting down? That's one way to translate it. The other way is, are we going to sit down? Imus sessum. We go to sit down or we go a-sitting down. Either way. All right. So now you've got the hang of it. Now try number 2. Stop the video and start it when you're ready to see the answer. And the answer? We came a-warning you, not a-beating you. And the other way to translate it? To warn you, to beat you. All right, try numbers 3 and 4 together, and then start the video when you're ready to see the answers on those. Number 3, the answer, a choice to give one's son teaching or to teaching. Either one of those 2 would work. And number 4, rem publicum servatum eunt. They are going a-saving the republic. They are going to save the republic. All right, so that's how it works. All right, now let's try the other case, the ablative singular down there. Okay, so first, it commonly follows neuter valuing adjectives or neuter valuing nouns. So for example, an adjective would be like mirabile, marvelous, or a noun would be like opus, necessary, or fas, right, or nefas, wrong. So marvelous by blanking, marvelous by calling, or necessary by calling, or right by the calling of it. So look over here in the examples at the right. Can you find some of those neuter adjectives or nouns? Shout them out right now. Okay, see how many you got. There they are. So if you see an obvious neuter like optimum or facile, and then some weird fourth declension ablative after it, blank oo, then guess what? It's probably a supine, right? By the blanking. And then my second piece of advice is pick a suitable ablative preposition with which to translate it. So wisu would be by, in, from, or with the blanking. So by the seeing, in the seeing, from the seeing, with the seeing. Now with, don't use that one. Instead, use something else that means essentially the same thing. At the seeing. So marvelous at sight is the way you would say that. Isn't the seeing the same as sight? Right, okay. So marvelous by sight, marvelous in the sight, marvelous from sight, marvelous at the sight of it. That's the way you understand it. Marvelous in this aspect of the seeing of it. So it's kind of like you put these blinders or this filter on that in this particular respect, it's marvelous. Not in all the others necessarily, just in the seeing. Wisu. Oftentimes you'll get other sensory supines like auditu, in the hearing, dictu, in the saying. All of these commonly occur in the ablative supine. And since the supine is an actual instance, an even better way to translate it might be its, marvelous at its seeing. All right, so, but most people just lazily translate it to blank. Mirabile dictu, marvelous to say. Now, I like better, marvelous in its saying. To me, that's much more poetic, but to each their own. So notice then, for both common cases, there are two options. One is always to blank, no matter which case it is, and then the other is the special one, a blanking or by, with, from, at the blanking. All right, so why don't you try number 5 now here, see if you can translate it in 2 separate ways. Stop the video and give it a try. And the answer? A thing res not only non modo in its sight disgusting, but even in its hearing. Now, foida actually was not neuter. I guess I messed up. I thought it was going to be neuter plural, but no, actually it's feminine singular because it's matching what other noun? Race, right. So in this case it was an exception, but that's what I said. It commonly follows a neuter, but not always. Here was the exception. So thing not only in its sight disgusting, but even in its hearing, auditu. And the other way you could translate it would be the common to translation. So a thing not only to see disgusting, but even to hear. That's a lot easier, isn't it? All right, next one. Now try to translate number 6 in 2 ways. Stop the video and start it when you're ready to see the answer. And the answer? What is best in fact or indeed in the doing of it? Or what is best to do? All right, now try the number 7 and 8. Stop the video and start it again when you're ready to see the answers. And the answers? Neither by sight easy nor by speech. The better translation would be neither easy to see nor easy to say. And then number 8, videtis nefas esse dictu, miseram fuisse talam hiemam. All right, so the first word introduces an indirect statement surrounding the infinitive esse, and then Inside of that, dictu introduces another indirect statement surrounding the infinitive fuisse. So this one was pretty hard, but let's see if you got it. Now, the way I'm going to translate this is that I'm going to supply the word there. Anytime you have the verb is and a subject, but no predicate necessarily, or in this case, a hard-to-express predicate, you can always make there be the alternate emergency subject. And instead of saying, evil is in the saying, rather say, there is evil in the saying. All right, so here we go. Y'all see that there is evil in the saying that miserable, or one might rather say sheer misery, to have been such a winter. That's clear, but clearer would be, y'all see it evil to be to say that the winter was miserable. All right, you got the idea. Okay, so before we go on, I want you to download this sheet here that you need to print up, preferably in color, although there is a black and white version at this link also, and put it into your notebook. So hopefully you've been keeping a notebook in which you've been putting all your vocab lists, grammar charts, notes, and completed stories. Add this into it. All right, so this is all your supines so far as of chapter 22. Now, why are these your supines? Well, because these are all the verbs which you have had so far. And remember, last chapter, in chapter 21, we learned the third and, more importantly, fourth principal part. And so anything that has a fourth principal part could now have a supine. So I've basically taken all your verbs so far and shown you which ones have common supines. Now, a lot of them I left out because for those, if it had a supine, it would be so rare and esoteric that nobody would use it. So I've only listed the common ones, the ones that I think you need to know. Okay, so on your own time, when you're studying your vocab, you need to also peruse through this and get familiar with all the blue supines on there. Now, you don't need so much to know the gray PPPs. That would be nice, but the blue ones are the most important. Now, this sheet is just for perusal. You don't normally want to study from this because this is only the fourth principal part. The better way to study verbs is to study from the stage 21, last chapter's vocab addendum. Why that one? Because that one has all four principal parts, and that's how you should recite the verbs to memorize them. So there's a link to that too down in the video description. Remember, of course, if you recite all four principal parts, you certainly can get the supine, because the supine is just the fourth principal part forced into the fourth declension. And both these links are available in the description below the video. All right, so now that we've learned supines pretty well, now let's compare it to other common constructions. In English, we have two, now it's going to be three common ways to say ing. And you need to know the difference between these. Okay, so far we had already gone over the difference between participles and infinitives. Both of these are a verb, an action, buried into something. In the case of participles, it's buried into an adjective. So a participle is technically a kind of adjective. In the case of the infinitive, it's buried into a noun. So an infinitive is a kind of noun. Both of them, however, were translated ing, as you see in the first line there. All right, so what's the difference? Well, one's an adjective and one's a noun, as I just said. All right, now over here we have a supine, which can also be translated to run or running, ing. So I go a-running, or I'm going out for a run. That is a supine, like we know, like we're just learning now. And that also is an action buried into a noun. So now we have two nouns here, each with an action buried inside of it. What's the difference between them? Do you remember what I said earlier in the video, what the difference is between these two? Oh yes, and we have to remember that supply odd. Assume that there's a hidden odd present. Okay, but what's the difference between these two? Right, the infinitive is abstract or real? Which one? The infinitive is abstract, looking up into the clouds. It's a concept. Whereas the supine here is down to earth. That's an actual one, an instance, right? Okay, so we would call the infinitive ideal, and we would call the supine real, right? That's the way it goes. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. All right, so now you've got supines. Let's just give it a little practice and see how you do. All right, so before we start, you might want to stop the video and review. I suggest you recite all these words. Down here on the lower right, right next to me, these mean field, place, or spot, and port. Okay, and as you're reciting these, you want to pay special attention to the fourth principal part, because that's going to give us our supine, and to the neuter. Why? Because that's going to be your typical valuing adjective that could introduce an ablative singular supine. Blank oo. Right. Okay. So stop the video and take a look at these and recite them, and then start it when you're ready to try the exercises. Okay, so here we're going to make a complex sentence with both of the two common kinds of supines. Okay, so we're going to first do an accusative in the first clause and then an ablative in the second clause. So the way you would understand this is, I went to take the land. Which thing? What thing? What am I talking about? That whole sentence is the thing. All that is necessary. Necessary how? In one of its aspects, in its doing. It's not necessary to say it. It's not necessary to see it. It's not necessary to remember it. No, it's necessary to do it. It is necessary to do it. To do what? That I should go to take the land. That. Okay. All right, so that's the way you think of it in English. But I don't want you to translate it like that. I want you to just say it word by word in Latin. So you would say the land and think, okay, what's the accusative of land? Terram, okay. To taking. So let's see, what's your taking verb? Capio. It goes capio, capere, capi, captus. So the accusative supine would be captum with that um ending, right? Okay. I went, and that's your standard verb. So ii, which quad I gave you, in its doing. So here for this one, you want to make an ablative supine ending in oo. So what would that be? Well, its principal parts go ago, agere, egi, actus. So actu, necessary is, and you could say opus est or necessa est, either one. So let's see, did we get that right? Yeah, we got it right. Terram captum ii quod factu necessa est. Oh, I thought it was actu, but it was really factu. Sorry, I messed up. All right, so let's try a couple. Start it, stop it. Try to get it like right in the center, like there. The town to saving we came, which thing at a glance difficult is. So, oppidum servatum venimus, quod conspectu difficula est. Yeah, that's pretty good. So hopefully you can get it about that fast. So download this PowerPoint from the link in the video description and try these a lot until you can say both the accusative supine and on this side the ablative supine pretty well easily no matter what comes up. All right. Then the second to last exercise I want you to do here is we want to practice all the other cases, not just the most common two. So I want you to answer all these with one word in Latin, but you might have to supply a prefix on the front of it, like in, out of, to, or toward, from, pre in front of, pro in front of, or re back. All those might be needed. So I'll do number 1 for you, the comings or arrivals. Well, you see I capitalized the, so that means it's the start of the sentence, namely the nominative. And so we have to think now what verb might give us comings arrivals. Obviously the verb come. So venio, venire, veni, ventus. Now notice though it says arrival. That has the connotation of coming not just anywhere, but coming to or toward, to here. So you might want to add on the ad prefix onto that. So advenio, advenire, adveni, adventus, and then you just have to turn this into a supine, in this case a nominative one. So adventus is what it should be. Oh, look, what did I do wrong? Yup, I forgot that it has to be plural. So plural, adventus. There we go, that's better. All right, so stop the video and try all these, and then turn it on when you're ready to see the answers. And the answers? Here are the answers. Hopefully you could get most of this stuff, even if you got a prefix wrong here and there. Yeah, so like in number 1, the common way to translate arrival is adventus, and then similarly in number 8, the common way to translate approach but not yet arrival is just aditus. So match the odd prefixes. Wherever the English has an odd prefix, put an odd prefix in the Latin. All right. So the final thing I want you to do here is to try these metagrammatical questions, see how well you were paying attention to the background technical jargon that was being used in this video. So stop the video and give these a try, and then start it when you're ready to see the answers. And the answers? Pretty straightforward. Hope it worked for you. All right, so now you've got this huge concept by which you can express abstract actions as if they're concrete nouns. You know, throwings, eatings, hearings. All these sayings that we commonly hear in English in our hearings are now expressible to you in Latin through that 4th principal part, giving us the supine. So good luck, and go try chapter 22 stories, and see you in chapter 23. Walete!